myself good. Talking about eschatology, we have looked at the three basic types. We're talking about, I guess you call it that, doctrines, theories, however you want to term it. And start out with the one I believe the Bible teaches, and that is Millennialism, which is the idea of no physical 1,000-year reign here on the earth. That Jesus started his reign when he ascended to heaven, and he will give up his reign the last thing he does there before judgment. And then we talked about premillennialism, the idea that that we're in the church age because the Jews rejected Christ, and so God couldn't set up the physical kingdom at that time, so he established the church in its place. We're in the church age. Prophecy stopped as time was supposed to be fulfilling. And so we've got this church age, don't know how long it will be, but then at some point, Jesus will have an invisible coming. There'll be a rapture of the saints, both living and dead. 7-year period we're going to talk about today, tribulation. And then Jesus comes back with those saints, establishing a 1,000-year reign. Some have a battle of Armageddon, or Gog and Magog, sorry about that, Gog and Magog starting, or Armageddon, that's it. And then at the end, Gog and Magog, it gets confusing because they've got two battles starting, one at the beginning of the 1,000-year reign, and then Gog and Magog, they base out of Ezekiel 38 at the end of this reign. And then the judgment of the wicked. All confusing, isn't it? To me, it's easier to believe what the Bible says and to post all that together. And then you have folks that say, well, no, there's not going to be a rapture, and that there's going to be a post-millennium, and he's going to come down and set up this 1,000-year reign, and then everybody will be judged at the end of the 1,000-year physical kingdom. So that's what we're talking about. So here's where we're at, looking at the chart. As I said, because of the Jews rejecting Christ, they say, okay, God couldn't set up his physical kingdom at that time, and so he set up the church as an afterthought. And then we've got the church in its place, and then there it is. And so then there's a 7-year tribulation period. As we mentioned last night, there's people that talk about a pre-tribulation rapture, a mid-tribulation rapture, or a post-tribulation rapture, and depending on what they believe about it, so it's kind of ambiguous as to what people will come up with. And then you talk to someone, you'll hear some kind of new twist, something else added. So if you're confused, I'm confused. I understand your confusion. So there's where we are. Okay. So the question we're asking this morning, should we be looking for a future great tribulation on earth? That's the question we want to deal with. And of course, there's a book, and I don't have the author's name on it. I think John Hagee might have wrote that book, called Tribulation Force, and lays all that whole theory out. And something happens somewhere all at once. They're seeing the tribulation starting, and you constantly hear that. Here's some a site called the End Time Prophecies. And you look at some of these headlines. They're just all kinds of things. This was from 2007. Probably getting long on the tooth now, and probably need to change that out to something newer. But you get an idea of how they try to apply all the lists to various things and be a great tribulation coming. And, there's one, UK kids get RFID chips. They see that kind of as a mark of the beast. No, here we go. Here we're starting the great tribulation. It's going to be starting any time. So various other things. Okay, come on. There we go. There we go. And so many wrongfully applied, fulfilled prophecies to current events. That's what I want you to see from that chart. Okay, here's the guy that's really a big proponent of this, a guy named John Hagee out of San Antonio, Texas, I believe is where he's from. Signs, wars, famines, plagues, disease, earthquakes, all kinds of things. Talks about the Antichrist, an individual. They see that as an individual, and you'll hear, one time I heard Obama was the Antichrist. Trump got in there. He's now was the Antichrist. I hadn't heard that out of Biden. I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with this. Let's not go there. Mark, Great Tribulation, Rapture. He talks about all that in that countdown book. Here's the proposed proof text. Not as many as we went through last night, but this is the text that they propose as proof of a great tribulation. Daniel 9:27, Matthew 24. I mean, that's their premillennial playground, what I call that, Matthew 24. And then they look at Revelation chapter 6 through chapter 18 as proof of this great tribulation. So what it boils down to, if it's not in these passages, it's not in the Bible. If we can't find it there. And really you have to force it there when you look at it. So Daniel 9:27. 70 weeks are decreed about, watch this, I told you, underscore this in your Bible. If you have your Bible, how many have your Bibles this morning? Man, I feel bad about not asking that last night. Okay, very, very good. Good to see your Bible. I always love to see Bibles. Take notes in your own Bible. I've seen people pick up a Bible out of what they call a pew Bible, and oh man, I can't take notes. Well, that's why you bring your own Bible. So good to see that. It's always good to see that. So back down to Daniel 9:23. 70 weeks are decreed. Now watch what I've got underscored. What's this decreed about? Your people and your holy city. Holy city being Jerusalem. Although they were in Babylonian captivity at the time Daniel wrote this, Jerusalem was still considered the holy city. It says, and here's the purpose. What's the purpose of this 70 weeks? Next line. To finish the transgression. To put an end to sin. What's going to put an end to sin? I'm listening. What's going to put an end to sin? That's not a trick question. You look at me like, he trying to trick me. No. Sacrifice of Jesus Christ, right? Isn't that what atoned for sin? What were they doing in the Old Testament? Remembering forward year by year till Christ's sacrifice. So keep that in mind. That's an answer again. The purpose of the why we've got this 70 weeks. To finish the transgression, put an end to sin, and see there's our next slide, to atone. What atone for iniquity? What atone for iniquity? The sacrifice of Jesus Christ. So you can see that if you can see through a picket fence, can't you? That's what he's saying here. To bring an everlasting righteousness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, that's purpose. When was that done? Again, sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. What did that do? Brought in the New Testament, didn't it? We're under the New Testament. So there we have it. To seal both vision and prophecy, and to anoint a most holy place. 25. Know therefore and understand, watch this, from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem. We talked about that the other night. Remember the decree that Cyrus gave. They were in captivity, 539. The Medo-Persians overtook Babylon. You read about it in Daniel chapter 5. Mene, tekel, upharsin. That's all has to do with this. If you remember that, then Darius, recall chapter 6, he's king all of a sudden. And so that happens, and then shortly after that, Cyrus issues the decree, you can go back to Jerusalem. There is the decree to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. So there's our time period. So he says, from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. And then he begins to break this down. This 7, he begins to break it down further. Then for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares, moats, but in troubled time. 26. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off. Any guess on that? You don't have to guess. Who is that? Who was cut off? Christ, Jesus. He was crucified. Wouldn't you call that being cut off? Yeah, I would. And shall have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come, so there's someone else coming, shall destroy the city. Who's that? Very simple. I heard it, Rome. Yeah, and who was that? What year? What year? What year was that? AD 70. Who was the general that led that? Titus. Why did he lead it? Why did Titus lead it? That's exactly right. Who was his dad? Vespasian. That's it. So there's what we have. And what's he going to do? He's going to destroy the city and the sanctuary. We read about that. History bears that out. Rome came in. They besieged the city. They put that siege around the city. And remember, that's when it got so bad that women were killing their children and eating them, so they had food to eat. That's how. Now, that's bad to hear before lunchtime, I know, but that's what happened. Well, we've got enough time. I don't think it'll affect it too bad, right? All right. So its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. We'll talk about that here in a minute. I believe it's on this chart. Okay, desolations are decreed. He shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. Okay, and for half the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wings of abomination, now here comes the key, on wings of abominations shall come one who makes desolate. Again, what's that? That's the Roman government. Comes in, desecrates the temple, pagan deity, pagan sacrifices. Would you say that desecrate the altar? Makes it unclean, can't use it. That's what happened. Until the decreed end is poured out on who's the desolator? Rome. On the desolator, around 450, Rome is no more. So there it is. Now, here's the premillennial view. 69 weeks. They arbitrarily start this at 450 BC, and they take this up to 26 AD. And of course, this is the time, the date they have for the Jews rejecting Christ. And again, here's the church age of what they call a parenthesis period. That is, and the reason they call it parenthesis is because prophecy is not going on here, so they call it, because they don't know really how long this period is. And then at some point, we have the events, the 7-year events taking place that they see as the tribulation period that we're going to talk about today. So you've got the 69 weeks. All at once it stops. We can't start the 7th week yet. 7th week starts with this tribulation period, and there it is, various views of it, and then the 1,000-year reign. At the end of the 1,000 years, Satan's loose to do his havoc, they claim a little bit, and then we have final judgment on the wicked because the righteous has already been. Yes, sir?
I have a question for you, if you wouldn't mind going back to your slides. I'm trying to follow your thought here.
Where do you want?
If you'll go back to Daniel 9:26.
Daniel 9:26. Is that it? That's 25.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm trying to follow your line of thought here. So, after 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off. And you're saying that's Jesus.
Okay.
And he'll have nothing. And the people of the prince. Who's the prince here?
Okay, the people of the prince who is to come. Okay, that right there, the people of the prince, there's Rome.
Okay, so who's the prince?
The prince would be, in this case, would be Titus.
Okay, all right. Sorry, all right.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, now let me go back here where we were. I think I'm ready for this chart. Okay. Is this the one? Yeah. Okay. Now, here it is here. City rebuilt by 432. This is what you have. Here's the proclamation, what you talked about a few minutes ago, Cyrus's proclamation, 539 BC. Ezra 1 through 4. Isaiah 44, verse 28, 45, verse 13. Isaiah names Cyrus there. Artaxerxes 457. A second decree. He's a Persian king. Remember, Ahasuerus shortly after him, Esther's king. Artaxerxes second decree 444. 444 is also Nehemiah going back and rebuilding the walls, and about that same time period, Malachi is written, the last writing of the Old Testament. Okay, so we have 69 weeks to the Messiah, cut off around 30 AD on the cross. Then we have covenant confirmed. What happened at the death of Christ on the cross? What happened in the New Testament? Comes in, right? Takes the death of the testator. Hebrews 9 tells us that. Hebrews 10 talks about that. Takes the death of the testator. We have the death of the testator on the cross. So we have 7 weeks from AD 30 to AD 70. That's considered, that's 1/7 there. And so we have the abomination which makes for desolation when Rome comes into the temple, desecrates the temple, offering pagan sacrifice and all these other pagan deities they put in there. And then the fall of Rome, there it is, 476. I was off 20 years. 476 AD, the final fall of the desolator. So there is the true interpretation of Daniel 9, verse 27. Any questions? Anybody have something? Okay. All right. Again, here's my chart. Same thing we just went over. That one's the other chart's probably a little easier to see. I made this 2 different ways because I didn't know how much explanation going to need, and I had used this in my dissertation to explain this a little further. Okay, abomination, desolation. Let's get into that now. Daniel speaks of the abomination, desolation. You'll notice Matthew 24, verse 15. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel. Daniel spoke about it, Jesus says. Standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Okay. Mark 13:14, parallel to Matthew 24. But when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not to be, let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Now catch that. Gives you an idea of the time period we're talking about. That's why I stopped there. So you might want to underscore flee to the mountains. Luke 21, verse 20. When you see Jerusalem, hey, look at this, gets a little closer. Surrounded by armies. When are they going to see that? It's going to be in their lifetime. We're going to talk about that shortly in generation here in a minute, but it shows it's in the lifetime of the people who Christ is talking to. When you see. Why would he tell me when I see if it's not going to be seen for 2,000 years? What good's it going to do to tell me when you see? Wouldn't make any sense, would it? No. It'd be like some caveman telling you, say, when you see a Tesla car coming out, well, he don't even know who Tesla is, much less a car. So it wouldn't make sense to do that. So he says, then know that its desolation has come near. So Bob's your uncle, there it is. That's what we're talking about. All right, verse 21. Here's what happens. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. And again, it doesn't make sense to me for them to flee to the mountains if this is a great tribulation before Jesus comes and establishes a physical 1,000-year reign. Wouldn't make sense to say that. Mountains aren't going to help you on that. But we will see what this has to do with in a minute. Let those who are inside the city depart. Why worry about where you are? That's the case. You know, why, if you're inside the city, do you need to depart? That's the key. And let not those who are out in the country enter the city. What do you say? For these are days of vengeance to fulfill ALL that is written. Okay. So let's look at some of this. Matthew 23, verse 33. Jesus says, you serpents, you brood of vipers. Now, why do I emphasize that? Because we're not looking at some future generation to be the serpents and brood of vipers. He says the ones I'm talking to, he's talking to them. How are you to escape being sentenced to hell? Therefore I send you prophets and wise men, scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, so that you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah the son of Barak, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, now that Zechariah son of Barak there has to do with events happening between the testaments. Okay, then he goes on to say, truly I say to you, all these things, watch this phrase, all these things will come upon who? This generation. When you talk about this generation, when you hear that type of language, what do you feel is being talked about? What's that mean? Present generation. Well, I think this is my next, no, it's not yet. I got a chart to show you here in a minute what a guy said about that. All right, verse 37. I get ahead of myself. I don't watch out. I don't have my next picture of my next chart. Okay, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets, stones those who are sent to it. How often, now notice who he's talking to, Jerusalem. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, but you were not willing. See, your house is left to you how? Desolate. How's it going to be left desolate? Roman army. Now, let's look at this idea, and that didn't show up over there yet. Truly I say to you, this generation, and someone just answered the question what this generation is. What is it again? Present generation. If I tell you you're going to see so-and-so happen, what's that mean? That means we can take the youngest person in here, and if none of the rest of us see it, that youngest person will see it probably. The idea. So he says, this generation will not pass until. There's a time period. I've got a Boston Terrier named Buster. He's pretty rough, and he don't like some people. Some people, I don't know, he just got a sense of it or something. And if I told one of these guys, I said, I'm going out of town, I need you to watch Buster. Well, he might not agree to that if he thinks he's going to have Buster forever. And I say, well, you only have to watch him till Tuesday. How long is he going to watch Buster? Is that hard to figure out? I told him Tuesday. Tuesday it gets here, he's going to be elated because I can finally get rid of this bloody dog. Tuesday's here. So we've got a time fix. So we've got this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So there's our time stamp. Here's the guy. Watch this. Remember what did we say a generation was again? This present. Look at what he says that this generation is. We are the generation Jesus was talking about. Now, how's that? Is there one of those fellows back then still around living? Man, what would he look like being that old? I mean, we get some rough-looking old codgers as they get older, but man, what in the world would that guy look like to be around? He said, I say that because unmistakably, for the first time in history, all the signs are coming together at an accelerated rate. Well, we got to figure all that out. We got to untwist all that, hadn't we? All right. How Lindsay? Generation. We got to start looking at some definitions. And I know you don't know Greek. I had a guy tell me one time, said, yeah, I knew a little Greek one time. He cooked in a restaurant right down the road. And maybe that's all the Greek some of you know. That's okay too. But we need to go back to that. Now, I mean, we get into the history of that because Koine Greek is a dead language. Koine Greek was well, I don't need to get into all that. Man, out here I go on a rabbit hunt, man. Not even rabbit season. All right. Genya. He says, that which has been begotten, a family, successive members of a genealogy, or a race of people possessed of similar characteristic pursuits. Watch this. Of the whole multitude of men, watch what this says now, living at the same time. There's passages. What's our passage we were just reading? Mark 24:34. Vine says it fits in that definition there of the whole multitude of men living at the same time. Now, if you have vines on your shelf at the house, you can go look it up. It'll be in there. You might have to look up generation instead of Genya, but that's okay too. All right, let's go on. All right. This generation, again, let's go look at the other. He sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why does this generation, again, is it us or people back then? People back then. Seek a sign. Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. Again, Luke 11, verse 50. There it is. So he said, the blood of all the prophets, we read this a few minutes ago, from the foundation of the world may be charged against who? This generation. Look at the bottom, verse 51. Yes, I tell you, it will be required of who? This generation. Luke 17:25. But first he must suffer many things and be rejected by who? This generation. All through here. All right. Matthew 24:33. So also, when you see all these things, who's the you see? Not a quick trick question. You're right, this generation. Yeah, what we've been just reading. You know, it sounds like that joke where they tell you, that you start spelling things and all at once, you're spelling. All at once they ask you, what does a cow give? And all at once you spell cow instead of say milk. It's that kind of thing it sounds like. But anyway, sorry, I digress. Verse 34, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass until these things take place. Look at Mark 13 again. So also when you see these things who's seeing this? You. I have that up here in a minute. Luke 21:31. so also when you see these things taking place. Again, this generation, see it all parallel and it all agrees. The Bible harmonizes. You, Matthew 24. Look at how many times you is used in different places. Matthew 24, verse 2. He answered them, said, you see all these things, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Verse 4, he says, see that no one leads you astray. I better come over here and talk to these people a little bit. They're going to feel left out. All right. Verse 15, so when you, see that? So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel. So it sounds like this abomination is going to happen when? Their generation. It's not going to wait for 2,000 or 3,000 years to happen. It's what we're seeing here. Verse 20, pray that your flight, who's at your? Again, people there. Your flight not happen in the winter. Why would we care when your flight had to happen if it's before a rapture or if it's at the end of the world? Wouldn't matter, would it? No. Verse 23. Then that's it. Okay. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ. See, I have told you. Verse 26. So see if they say to you. Verse 33. Let me read the last one. This is. So also when you see all these things. So who's the you talking about? Point made? That generation. Not looking to the future. All right, false Christ. Well, what about that? Well, notice Acts chapter 5. Where'd it go? Here it is. Acts chapter 5, verse 36. For before these days, Thaddeus rose up, claiming to be somebody. And other translations claim he's claiming to be Christ. And a number of men, about 400, joined him. He was killed, and all who followed were dispersed. Remember Simon the sorcerer? Acts the 8th chapter. What did he claim? He claimed to be someone great. So people could think of him like a Christ. But there was a man named Simon who had previously practiced magic in the city and amazed the people of Samaria, saying that he himself was somebody great. There's the claims. How about wars and rumors, and natural disasters, persecution? Well, verses 6 through 13, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, and see that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, earthquakes in various places. All these things are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up. Who's the you again? We don't have to go through that now, do we? All right. Up to tribulation. Keep that you in mind here. That's why we went through that. Who's delivered up to tribulation? And put you to death. You will be hated by nations for my name's sake. I won't read the rest of it for sake of time. Here's some historians back during that time period. Tacitus of the 1st century A.D., shortly thereafter. The history on which I am entering is that of a period rich, this is back then now, rich in disasters, terrible with battles, torn by civil struggles, horrible even in peace. 4 emperors fell by the sword. There were 3 civil wars, more foreign wars, and often both at the same time. Bob's your uncle. There it is. Wars and rumors of wars. Josephus. You don't like Tacitus? Here's Josephus. Josephus. Now her coming was of very great advantage to the people of Jerusalem, For whereas a famine did oppress them at that time, many people died for want of what was necessary to produce food. Withal, Queen Helena sent some of her servants to Alexandria with money to buy a great quantity of corn, and others to Cyprus to bring a cargo of dried figs. Famine. Josephus talks about it. Tacitus again, pestilence. Many prodigies occurred during the year. Ominous birds took their seat on the Capitol. Houses were overturned by repeated shocks of earthquakes, and as the panic spread, the weak were trampled underfoot in the trepidation of the crowd. A shortage of corn, again, the famine which resulted, were construed as a supernatural warning. Now, this is prior to AD 70 we're talking about, what we're looking at. What did Jesus say you're going to see? Wars, rumors of wars, famine, and pestilence. They're saying it happened. They're saying the people saw it. These historians from their day. Here's another one. He's not that time period, but look at what he says. As to the earthquakes, many are mentioned by writers during a period just prior to 70 AD. We just had some. There were earthquakes in Crete, Smyrna, Miletus, Chalus, Samos, Laodicea, Hierapolis, Colossae, Campia, Rome, Judah. And it is interesting, now here's one that will be familiar to us. It is interesting to note that the city of Pompeii, you ever seen pictures of that one? How sudden that was, isn't that gruesome? Think of that. Was much damaged by an earthquake. Look at when it occurred. How many years before 70 AD? 7. See that? Abomination of desolation. We've already looked at Daniel 9:27, Daniel 12:11, Luke 20 through 24. Let me see if I can find. Okay, Daniel 12, verse 11. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, Daniel's prophesying, we look back, when is that? When is the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away? Very simple. AD 70, Rome comes into the temple. What do? They start offering pagan sacrifices. They put up pagan deity. They cannot use the altar anymore because the altar is unclean, so burnt offering's taken away. The burnt offering's taken away. And the abomination that makes desolate is set up. There shall be, and it gives the number of days, Daniel does. Jesus, here it is, gave the Olivet Discourse. That's what Matthew 24 is referred to as, the Olivet Discourse, in about 30 AD. Jerusalem was destroyed by Titus, the Roman general. There it is, 70 AD. So there you have it. Bob's your uncle. Josephus. Agnes stood in the midst of them, casting his eyes frequently at the temple, having a flood of tears in his eyes. He said, certainly it has been good for me to die before I had seen the house of God full of so many abominations. Notice that term, abomination of desolation. What did he say? Abominations. Or these sacred places that ought not to be trodden upon at random, filled with the feet of these blood-shedding villains. Who's that? Blood-shedding villains? Romans, Roman army. Well, what about this tribulation? Well, if we look at verses 16 through 18, an interesting read here. He says, then let those who are in Judea. Now, where's Judea? Is it around Dallas here somewhere? You ever been there? I didn't say Jewish community, I said Judea. Judea is where? Over there in the Middle East, right? Still there, I believe. So he says, those who are in Judea, flee to the mountains. We might have a long way to flee here. I hadn't seen any mountains. He said, let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house. Let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that your flight not be in the winter or a Sabbath, for then, you catching it? Then, when? What we just read. Then there will be, what? Great tribulation, such as has not been seen from the beginning of the world until now. He didn't say over the whole world. What has he narrowed this down to? He's narrowed this down to locality. A local tribulation, not a worldwide tribulation. That's why I asked you where Judea was, making sure it wasn't here in Dallas somewhere. It's a local tribulation, such as has not been seen. Then he goes on to say, and if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, you see God looking out for the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe. For false Christs, false prophets will arise, perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you before, and so if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say to you, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Local tribulation. There it is. Those in Judea flee, on the housetop, in the field, the pregnant. Pray that your flight be not in the winter or the Sabbath. Was inescapable. Local. All that's local. Judgment on national Israel. That's what we see there. I won't take time to read that. It looked like we're getting about time to. I didn't think this thing was going to go this long this morning. Now, I just want to show you this right quick. Here's where apocalyptic language is used in the Bible to describe judgment on other nations. I won't go through these. I'll just put these up here right quick, and you can see the same type of language is used other places in the Bible. Babylon, Edom, the peoples, Judah, Egypt, the nations, Nineveh, and Israel. There you go. There they are. This same type of language is used. I ain't even got to Revelation yet. Man, I can't believe this. All right. There we go. Over 1 million Jews died in the destruction. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm coming. In Jerusalem, thousands more were killed outside of the city. As you see why I didn't stand up there now. I was afraid there was a trap door and I'd be disappearing. And in other cities, over 97,000 were carried away. Tribulation in that? Yes, sir. And there we go again. We've had that up. I'll pass that up. I'll do the Passover. Revelation. There's Revelation. Soon to take place. All I want you to see. The time is near. I just flip through them. That are to take place after this. Telling John, the things you see are going to take place after this. Must soon take place. The time is near. Over and over again. Look, book of Revelation. Let me skip forward and get off this madness. All right. So, should we be looking for a great tribulation on earth yet in the future? I believe we've shown that this tribulation took place when the Roman army came in, besieged Jerusalem. That was certainly a time of great tribulation. People fleeing for their lives, fleeing to places of safety. If you stayed in the city, the siege is coming, and you're bound to be killed. You saw over 1 million. So certainly that was a time of great tribulation. No, we're not to. And so these passages do not teach a future great tribulation on earth. And I believe we can stop there. All right. I'm all through playing now.